Thank you, everybody, for coming here tonight. It's great to see so many people. And it's especially a special honor that we have with us tonight Mazin Qumsiyeh from Bethlehem. Professor Mazin Qumsiyeh is a Palestinian geneticist, environmental scientist, and activist. He's held university posts at Tennessee, Duke, and Yale universities in the States, where he mobilized mass protests in support of Palestinian liberation for the so-called Wheels of Justice tour. He returned to Palestine in Bethlehem University maybe 15 years ago. He's founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. He's written extensively on environmental destruction in Palestinian lands. He recognizes global environmental crises as major challenges to Palestinian survival alongside Israeli genocidal oppression. His books include The Bats of Egypt, Mammals of the Holy Land, Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment. And in 2004, he set out his vision for the future of Palestine at that time in Sharing the Land of Canaan, Human Rights and the Israeli-Palestinian Struggle, where he proposed his own particular version of a future secular anti-discriminatory state in the whole of Palestine. Mairead Corrigan-Maguire, whose peace activism in Northern Ireland won her the prize in 1976, the Nobel Prize, has nominated Professor Qumsiyeh for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. I think it's with gratitude that we welcome you here, Mazin, and it's an honor to us to have you with us.
Thank you.
I think that I always feel uneasy. I mean, this is nominally an environmental seminar, but I always feel uneasy about looking away from what we know is happening around us, and particularly around you. And so I wonder if we might start by you, as you say, already, you said you were up at 3 this morning. How do you sleep with what's going on around you? And maybe we could start with you telling us something about what is going on around you at this time of a fake ceasefire, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that we are becoming more and more connected, of course, is social media. And unfortunately, I cannot travel now because Bethlehem is pretty much blocked in, and certainly I cannot get to Jerusalem. I'm not allowed into Jerusalem, which is only 5 kilometers away from me here. I used to be a high school teacher in Jerusalem. I'm not allowed to enter Jerusalem for many years, simply because I'm Palestinian Christian, not Jewish. So the nature of what we face here is, allows us both to be immersed in the suffering, if you want to call it like that, immersion. But at the same time, the connectivity around the world allows us to be kind of also like you observers from distance, if you want. Let me just give you an example. Today, as every day, I receive messages from Gaza on WhatsApp. Friends of mine in Gaza, colleagues that we helped. For example, there's this girl that we brought to the United States from Gaza in 2001. She was shot in the eye by an Israeli sniper with a rubber-coated steel bullet. She lost her eye, so we brought her. I was then at Yale and Yale Eye Clinic and others helped her. We got her prosthetic eye. She went back to Gaza. She's from North Gaza. They were displaced from North Gaza, of course, to South Gaza. She doesn't have any longer, of course, that prosthetic eye, so she has a patch on her eye. She sent me a picture of her and of her family in the tents, in the displaced tents. But anyway, she has since married and so forth, and has a child who's 11 years old. Her son, of course, there's no schools in Gaza because all the schools were shut down, and Israel bombed about 80% of the schools in Gaza, and all the universities are also bombed. But anyways, they were moved about 7 times. Each time they are told, go to this area because it's safer. And then that area gets bombed, so go to that area because it's safer. Sometimes go back to the same area now that that's safer. And so moving 7 times, if you want, in the past 15 months, and their home is completely demolished, of course, and gone. All their things are gone. You know, she managed to salvage from her home a couple of personal belongings, including my card, my business card. That's how she contacted me very early on in November 2023, after her house was bombed. So what's her message today? Her message today was that she and her father and her mother and her son and her 2 brothers and their families, they went to the crossing to try to get back to North Gaza, where their house is, their demolished house, of course. And there were tens of thousands of people trying to get to North Gaza. Israel didn't allow them. In fact, they shot and killed, I think, a woman and a child trying to get to North Gaza. But tens of thousands couldn't get to North Gaza, even though the terms of the ceasefire was that they allow people to go back to their homes in North Gaza. So anyway, she said, we came back to the tent here in Deir el-Balah area. And then she said, my brother is staying at the border to see if they allow through, maybe through the night or something, they can sneak through and he can go back and, you know, because we want to make sure that there is food in North Gaza and stuff like that. So he wanted to take a risk himself and go and see if he can, and then come back and get us. This is just one of thousands of stories I'm inundated with every week, basically, of things that are happening around me and in Gaza. Around us here in the West Bank, of course, Israel emptied the Jenin refugee camp of its residents, most of them, except a few resistance fighters and some old people that cannot move. So they want to do in Jenin and Northwest Bank what they are doing in Gaza, which is a genocide and an herbicide, destruction of the urban infrastructure and everything, all the streets. They send these D9 bulldozers, for example. My friends in Jenin, who I talk to regularly, tell me that the entrance to the Jenin refugee camp, all the roads have been intentionally dug up, basically, to destroy the infrastructure, including the electricity and the sewage and things like that. That's what they did in Gaza. It's to make it unlivable, basically. And then I have a friend who works at UNRWA, and he came visited me today, and he said, you know, they're shutting down our offices in Jerusalem at the end of this month, January 30th. There's 2 buildings that belong to UNRWA and good land around them. These were, at the time, Jordan was here, actually. They were here. UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees. It's supposed to be UN protected buildings, but Israel is going to demolish them and build the residential and buildings and schools in their place. And they don't want the UNRWA. They claim UNRWA is supporting terrorism because UNRWA speaks about refugees, but that's why it was created, to help refugees. There are 8.5 million Palestinian refugees in the world, displaced people. About 5.5 million of them are under the care of this United Nations Relief and Work Agency, as it's called, or UNRWA. And it's a humanitarian UN mission. It was signed on to by all the governments of the world, including the Israeli government, by the way, when it was created, that UNRWA is a United Nations protected entity, but the Israeli Knesset declared it, an entity that's unwanted, and they basically are declaring war on UNRWA, and they bombed most UNRWA schools in Gaza, most of the UNRWA clinics and facilities and service buildings and so forth in Gaza. So anyway, this will be closed finally in Jerusalem, in Shafat area and so forth, 30th of this month, in a week or less. What does that mean? It means the Palestinians in the refugee camps like Shafat refugee camp, or the refugee camps in Bethlehem, and certainly the refugee camps in Gaza have been mostly demolished, or the refugee camp in Jenin that's being demolished as we speak in the West Bank. Those will be without services, without humanitarian aid, without potential for any recovery or anything else. There's no entity that can really replace UNRWA in taking care of Palestinian refugees, which, as we speak, are still the largest refugee population on earth. And in terms of the ecocide that happened in Gaza, I mean, just an hour ago, I received a message from a co-author that our paper was accepted. The lead author messaged me, said our paper was accepted. We wrote a paper highly detailed, composed of 5 collections of experts on the destruction of green cover in Gaza and of the greenhouses in Gaza. This is now accepted in a journal of remote sensing. We had 5 teams of experts, including from Sweden, the UK, Canada, and the US, and Palestine, of course, us. And we showed, for example, in this one, we mapped every single greenhouse in Gaza, that in the North Gaza, there's only 2 greenhouses standing among the many that were, hundreds that were gone. In South Gaza, there's still some greenhouses. In tree cover in North Gaza, around Gaza City, pretty much 94% of tree cover is gone, destroyed intentionally by the State of Israel. So the situation is horrific. And then part of my lack of sleep is I wake up to hear news like, hey, Donald Trump said that he called Jordan and Egypt and asked them to take the Palestinians of Gaza. And so that the Israelis can build Gaza beautiful and nice beaches and have real estate there. That's what Donald Trump wants. So this is, of course, what they are trying to accomplish. Other news, of course, that we all watch. I'm not sure how much you get news where you are, but here we get a lot of news, for example, about the Palestinian hostages, Palestinian prisoners that are being released, 200 of them in the past 24 hours. All of them were tortured and mistreated in jail, some with permanent disabilities. All of them have lost a lot of weight. Some of them, one of them included the longest serving Palestinian prisoner so far released. He served 40 years in jail. He's an older man, gentleman. He entered when he was 22 years old, so he's now 62 years old. And you see images that I can't put them out of my mind when somebody who's been in 22 years in jail gets out, he goes, visits his mother's grave. She died while he's in jail. He could never visit with him, or, things like that. This is the horrors that we are facing. Instead, the Western media is focusing on the 4 Israeli soldiers that were released in the past 24 hours. Women soldiers, they happen to be. But they were very well treated with the resistance movement. They were very healthy, well taken care of, well fed in Gaza for the past 15 months. They apparently learned Arabic and they in this 15 months. So they thanked in Arabic the resistance fighters for taking care of them, for saving their lives when they were being bombed by the Israeli military, and so on. These are the kinds of things that, this is just in one day, what I am experiencing now, and that's just part of my day. So I don't want to go too long and see what your other question.
Yeah, thank you, Mazin. I mean, it gives of course, a picture which we can only guess at in a sense from here. We know how horrific it is. For the next period, can we focus on the environmental issues? You mentioned about the extent of destruction in Gaza itself. And I wonder if you'd say something about the water situation and how that, I mean, you can say something about the water situation in Gaza, but of course, the water situation in the whole of Palestine is pretty critical and exacerbates the effects of climate breakdown too. So I wonder if you would say something about the water situation.
So Palestine is in the Mediterranean zone. Most of Palestine is Mediterranean climate, similar to like Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc. in terms of rainfall. We get fairly good rainfall on normal years, on average years. For example, here in Bethlehem, we get about 800 millimeters of rain or so a year. In Gaza, about South Gaza is less. North Gaza is a bit more at 500 to 600 millimeters of rain. That's not too bad, although this year, the rainfall so far, and there's still a few more weeks of winter, so to speak, but so far, it has been about half of the yearly average that we have gotten over the years to this period. So this year is the worst year, is going to be the worst year for us in decades, basically, in hundreds of years even, that we can tell. So there is a decline in rainfall. It has already happened in the past 20 years, with noticeable decline of about 15%. But now it's going to be much higher. There's estimates of 40% on average. Maybe this year is 50%, but than average. But in the next 20, 30 years, it's going to be about 30 to 40% is what the models, depending on the computer model you use, that are predicting for this area. Okay, so what's the situation for us? even if it was lower, let's say in Gaza, 600 millimeters, etc., or 500, it is still would have been sufficient if it would not, or in the West Bank for that matter, it would be sufficient for our uses if it was not for the colonization. Colonization uses most of our water. In the West Bank, 95% of our water. In Gaza, the Gaza water aquifer is already depleted, and Israel has stopped the upstream replenishment of Wadi Gaza many decades ago, actually, from the beginning of their occupation. They used to, Wadi Gaza, for example, used to be a river. It's no longer getting that water. So anyway, Gaza became impoverished for water. The West Bank became impoverished for water for the local people, not for the settlers, the colonizers. For example, I live in Beit Sahour, here's a shepherd's field. Water comes and goes at the whim of the Israelis. Maybe in the summer, we go several weeks without water. Right next to me in Beit Sahour, there's a group of settlements called Ku'a settlement. El David is one of them, where Avigdor Lieberman lives. Used to be Israeli foreign minister or something. Anyway, in this complex of settlements, they even have swimming pools. They have a water park. They have as much water as they want, which is our water, of course, stolen Palestinian water. Now, in Gaza, of course, the latest war, before the war, actually, the UN had said the water situation is horrific in Gaza. But after this latest onslaught on the people of Gaza that started October 2023, basically Israel bombed all the water storage facilities, all the pipelines, and also denied electricity, denied fuel, which we need, of course, for pumping water from the ground up to use. So Gaza became basically starved for water. And water is critical for hygiene. And so you have a huge problem with the epidemics, healthcare issues. There's, from the World Health Organization, I think the latest number is 1.1 million Gazans suffer from diseases related to the poor hygiene and lack of water. That includes like hepatitis and the skin disorders, lung disorders, intestinal disorders. And even at one point, polio started spreading among Gaza population. Polio was basically extinguished around the world, except I think there were a couple of cases in Afghanistan in 2022. But anyway, there was polio in Gaza because of lack of vaccines, lack of, and also when you crowd people, and you take 2.3 million people living in a strip of land that's 365 square kilometers. That's one of the highest densities on Earth. And not only that, you say to them, look, you have to move to this 5% of the land that I now designate for you as safe area. And then I bomb that area, you have to move to this other 5% of the land that I designate as a new safe area. And then you go back to the other area, and you're moving people in large masses of hundreds of thousands of people, basically, being squeezed in areas that are, it's incredible. I mean, the picture, you can see people just literally have no place to lay down because they are mostly standing up in those, and they take shifts sleeping in the tents.
Yeah.
This girl I mentioned earlier, she said the one tent that they live in has 40 people in it. I said, how is one tent accommodate 40 people? She said, well, it's a slightly larger tent, but still we cannot all sleep at the same time.
Yeah.
You can imagine.
And I think you've said that the water situation in Gaza has been exacerbated by the pouring of seawater into the tunnels, which is then affecting the aquifer. I mean, it's part of what's making
Right, right.
Gaza unlivable.
Yes. I mean, our studies, even though we are not on the ground yet, we're doing some things via remote sensing, as I said, and via some people who are on the ground who are taking some pictures for me of the damage and doing some basic environmental assessment. One of them is a professor actually of environment, or used to be a professor. Now his university is demolished, and his name is Yasser Nahal. His university is demolished. He has 12 children himself, and he's barely making it to eat with his family. But yet he still has his mobile phone and has internet and can send me pictures of the damage of the trees and stuff like that, and the damage to the water systems. And it's pretty bad. I mean, you're right. Also, Israel flooded some tunnels that Hamas and other resistance groups have built. They flooded them with seawater. But you can also imagine now it's not just seawater, it's also sewage of people.
Yeah.
Because you don't have sewage treatment facilities, you don't have any way to do anything with the sewage other than, let it pile, go down, small alleys or valleys or whatever. And that all ends up in the water system eventually. So we have a huge problem. Some of it may not be recoverable in Gaza.
Yeah. And Gaza, I mean, at one time, Gaza was part of a fertile growing area, which I think you've described the past of the fertile crescent of that area.
Yes, the whole of Palestine, including Gaza, is very fertile and very rich in agriculture. That's where humans first developed agriculture. That's where our ancestors first went from hunter-gatherers to settled communities, pastoralism and agriculture. This is the Fertile Crescent. So that's where this is where we domesticated trees like olives, where we domesticated vegetables and wheat and barley and chickpeas and lentils from wild plants. These were all being grown in Gaza, by the way. Gaza was very rich in natural resources of agriculture. And of course, it's also rich in gas fields now. That's part of the reason why Israel wants it as beachfront property overlooking the gas fields that Israel is already stealing our gas, basically, and exporting to Europe to replace Russian gas that was basically not flowing to Europe because somebody bombed the Nord Stream pipelines. But anyways, Israel is profiting in the billions of dollars from Gaza and from the West Bank and from our natural resources. And of course, the people pay the price.
And this reshaping of the whole area has been a many decades long process of through colonization.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I mean, this is what colonization does. If you think about, the British Empire and how it colonized Australia and North America, and how the US was reshaped environmentally. Even much of the virgin forests are gone. Same thing in Australia, invasive species, prevalent destruction of river courses, riverbeds. I mean, Jordan River here in the West Bank, by the way, is gone. There's no longer a Jordan River. It has been depleted, has been gone because of the Zionist project to take its water so that the indigenous people do not have access to that water.
there's been a particular deliberate attempt to shift the nature of the trees that grow easily in that area.
Yes, Israel did a huge engineering problem, if we want engineering program to to change things. So when they destroyed, for example, 530 Palestinian villages and towns between 1948 and 1950, they uprooted all the trees around them, olive trees, fig trees, almonds, even wild trees like oaks and hawthorn and carobs. And they planted one kind of tree, which is the European pine tree, which is a monolithic culture, terrible for biodiversity, and also susceptible to fires. And we see the fires already in places like the Galilee just a couple of months ago, or West Jerusalem and other places.
Yeah, and at the north, in the north of what in that Galilee area, didn't that used to be sort of waterlands?
Yeah, there's the Hula wetlands.
The wetlands of the northern part.
In just north of Lake Tiberias. This was drained by the Zionist movement in the 1950s. They call it draining the swamps. I don't like the word swamps. They are wetlands. There were 12 Palestinian communities living off of these wetlands. All of the communities were ethnically cleansed, and but also the wildlife suffered. 219 species disappeared. Israel dubs itself, by the way, as a green country, even though it's one of the worst countries environmentally, or states, I shouldn't say country, because Israel is a regime and a state, not a country. But they destroyed the environment here. I mean, Lebanon, for example, nearby, is much better environmentally than our country, Palestine, that is now called Israel. Even in Lebanon, you find the Syrian bear still there in the forest. You find huge cedar forests still in Lebanon. In our country, it's pretty much devastated environmentally, thanks to the Zionist project that started really in the 1920s, not 1948.
Yeah. And in terms of, so if you lose wetlands, then that's an area for the migration of birds traveling thousands of miles. I suppose that has all changed.
Yes.
And because that area has been a stopping point, hasn't it, for bird migration?
Right. Between Europe and Africa, about, we estimate over 700 million birds migrate between Europe and Africa annually. Most of those, 500 million of them, pass through Palestine, or used to pass through Palestine. We don't know what the numbers is now, but we see really desperate situation for some of the birds.
Yeah.
And some are going extinct, of course, some not going extinct, but reduced in numbers, and huge numbers reduction.
So in all this ecocidal activity of the occupation and of the military, you had tried to create a community who is trying to find hope in the area through your Palestine Museum of Natural History, and particularly the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, which you set up, I think, 10 years ago. And how do you manage to help people to engage in interesting projects when you see destruction around you?
Yeah, I mean, earlier I talked about the bad parts of my day-to-day. Let me tell you about the positive parts of my day-to-day. Victor, who's attending with us here, he and I went down, fed our eagle owl, which we had rescued recently. This week we rescued an eagle owl that's injured, apparently cannot fly well. and we're taking care of it. And we even had a group of children on Friday learn about owls here, and how to protect owls and why owls are really important. In some Arabic tribal cultures, owls are a bad omen, and in some other countries and other cultures, it's a sign of wisdom and whatever. And we try to teach them that owls are part of nature and the web of life, and we have to all take care of each other, etc. And Sarah from my team, she does a brilliant job of educating children about these things and showing them living examples of it. So this, and then we have a garden, my wife Jessie went down to the garden, watered our community garden because today is Sunday and there's no staff. And to water the garden, so we take care of it during the weekends. These kinds of activities, what we do at this institute, really is what keeps me sane, what keeps me rational, what keeps me hopeful, because what we do is work towards sustainable human and natural communities. If you watch the world and the climate change and the wars and the weapons of mass destruction that people are using, and the horrors of what you see, like with the genocide and ecocide and scholasticide in Gaza, it can be overwhelming. It can be a huge problem, and you can say, well, what's going to happen? Well, the best antidote to despair is activism and doing something positive, building something. So that's what we are doing. We're even building a new museum right here, which is going to increase our exhibit space by 12 folds to 1,350 square meters. This institute is called Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, and it's concerned, as the name implies, about sustainable human and natural communities. And of course, you have to sustain both the indigenous people on their land and also the nature. And nature can live without humans, of course, but humans cannot live without nature. So, so we have to protect our environment. And somebody told me, well, there's politics more important than this. And, you can't, if they kill us all, well, what are we going to do? But our environment anyway, we cannot protect it. I say it's actually part of our resistance, because, and the way the way you can understand that is the colonizers want to disconnect us from the land, literally rip us off from the land, as they are doing in Gaza, and literally destroy everything. And if we do anything positive to reconnect with the land, to have a community garden, plant some things, grow our own vegetables, food sovereignty. We have chickens even that produce eggs, and we eat from those. And we show people that this is important, and this is our culture and our heritage, as we mentioned earlier, as you mentioned, the Fertile Crescent. This is our heritage and the heritage of all humanity. So I think that's where it is positive and energizing and optimistic, if you want, hopeful.
Yeah. Somebody's asking me about spider cucumbers. I guess you know something about that. I don't know about it.
Yeah, it's a snake cucumbers, we call them. In Beit Sahour, my village is known for this kind of cucumber. We call it fakous. So it's every village or town in Palestine is known for something interesting. Like Batir is known for its eggplants, and Bethlehem is known for its birthplace of Jesus and all that stuff. So
Okay.
that's where my village is.
And you planted some, so we planted some spider cucumbers, Mazin,
Oh, good.
last year. How are they doing? How are the spider cucumbers doing, my friend?
No, this is not the season for them.
But we planted them, right? We
Well, that was in the summer. We ate some of them and it's finished. That's a different season.
okay.
So we'll I mean, can you say something about how the area is facing up to climate breakdown and how you think about that in your institute and how you relate that think about that as the level of threat that you have to existing in that area with the rising temperatures. And I think, of course, with rising temperatures, you get faster evaporation of a smaller quantity of water and so on.
Yeah. I mean, let me just start by giving you an interesting statistical observation. Israel, in bombing Gaza and bombing Lebanon in the past 15 months, just from jet fuel alone, produced more greenhouse gases than a European country produces in a whole year from all their sources, like cooking and gas and cars and everything else, industries and so on. Just from jet fuels, just from the jets flying, the F-15s and F-16s and so forth. So war and destruction are also a climate change issue. And this is not even counting the bombs and the fireballs and the incinerator. Literally, people evaporated from some of the bombs that Israel dropped on them. Literally, you couldn't find even a remnant, like a fingernail from them at the site of the bomb. In some places, of course, they could find body parts and they could collect them in bags. But anyways, this is the impact of war on climate. War is a climate change issue. The military around the world is the largest producer of greenhouse gases that's unaccounted for because all the military in the major industrial countries, like Israeli society, like the US, are not required to report their greenhouse gas emissions. The reason we know about the jet fuels because you know what a jet produces and how much fuel it consumes because there are specifications on those, and you know how many sorties Israelis flew, in Gaza, for example, over the first few months, and you could extrapolate and you could get these numbers. But in terms of, they don't have to report this. There's nothing for them to report. How much does dropping a 2,000 bomb area to incinerate the whole neighborhood, how much does that produce in greenhouse gases? So anyways, this is one aspect. But climate change, of course, is a global problem. It's not a local problem. As you can see, for example, in the fires in California.
Sure.
And as you can see in the fires here, in the Galilee and other places. As you can see in the reduction of the rainfall around some places, increase in other places. By the way, it becomes unpredictable where it's going to come, which is terrible for agriculture because agriculture, you develop, so food production is impacted because agricultural production, plants are used to certain rains in certain seasons, and when you don't get them, you have problems. Or if you get too much rain, you can get infections and parasites and so on. So it is impacting the whole globe. One thing I would say about it, and of course it's impacting us, but this is not the only impact that we get. We got climate change, we got pollution. For example, white phosphorus and depleted uranium from the bombing. We get leftover unexploded bombs. We get, that's all pollution, which affects human health. The other thing is overexploitation of resources. and also invasive species. Israel brought a bunch of invasive species to our country that are devastating us, like the myna bird or like the haven tree and others. And even the pine tree, I consider it invasive now. So you get all this combination of things, and all these terrible effects on our environment act in synergy, in combination. You cannot really isolate them from each other. So they act in synergy, and they're global. So I say this maybe is this warning bell to humanity. Maybe will help us to change our ways. I'm hoping, I'm praying that this will help us change our ways, because our ways in the past of colonization, European American consumerism and unfettered capitalism, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, is no longer sustainable. Maybe when the human population was 1/10 of what it was now, it was sustainable, but now it's not sustainable, and the planet is going to die if we don't act.
Yeah. So we're going to hear some questions from others. I mean, of course, we had one question. People want to know, you know, we sit here in the UK, in England, and of course we go on marches and we do what we can, but people feel completely powerless. Somebody said, what can people in the UK do to prevent this genocide from continuing? We feel powerless. This is from Rona asking you. And we all struggle with this question.
Yeah, the other day I saw a cartoon on Facebook that says, or a statement says, what can I do as a single individual? Said one of 7 billion people. So
Yeah, of course.
we're not individual, okay? We can act as individuals, but collectively we make a huge difference. Let's think about it this way. Even I lived in the US for more than 25 years. And if I look back at the history of the US, horrible things happened in the history of the US. I don't need to recite them for you. Whether it's the genocide of Black Americans in the slavery period or the genocide of Native Americans, hundreds of tribes were destroyed, etc. But if you look at the positive things that happened in the US, what are the positive things in the past 250 years? Like, for example, civil rights, ending slavery, getting 40-hour work week, ending the US war on Vietnam, ending, giving women right to vote, which happened only in the 1920s, I think. How did those things happen? How did we change such incredible odds against the people there? Civil rights, for example, was incredible odds. But how did they get it? Well, they got it because there was enough people like you and me who said enough is enough. I want to be involved and I want to do something. And cumulatively, we do things, and then the power structures give way. They don't give way because they see, they find God or or they get inspiration. No, that we force them. The politicians do this. They stick their finger in the air to see where the wind is blowing from. And what we have to do is provide them with a hurricane to make them change their views. So what we need is a global revolution, which many people have been calling for it, including me 25 years ago. A global revolution where we understand that our struggles are connected in ways that even most of us don't even dream how connected they are. I'll give you an example of the fires in California. Many of you don't know that California has good water, but most of it was diverted to plantations owned by a couple of very rich, wealthy Zionists that are sending this money to Israel, and they wanted this water, and they have a lot of influence in the California government, and they managed to get the government to give them a lot of water so that when they tried to put out the fires, California didn't have water, enough pressure and enough water to put out the fires. This is the kind of thing that you have to think of the connection. The rich people get richer, and the poor people and the ones whose homes are being burned, they're thrown under the bus, so to speak.
Somebody was asking if you have any particular knowledge about Dr. Hussam Abu Safia and the staff of Qamar. Dr. Hussam Abu Safia.
Oh, Hussam Abu Safia. You know, I knew the guy, believe it or not. I had emailed him in 2008, in December 2008. He was one of the doctors I had emailed when I found out that Israel was using white phosphorus, and I researched white phosphorus, and I found that treatment for it is very different than other kinds of burns, because white phosphorus actually feeds on liquid, on water. So you cannot use wet bandages or anything like that. You really have to dry the wound and pick it by forceps. And I wrote a spec sheet on this, and I sent it to a lot of doctors, which I looked up emails in Gaza. And so anyways, no, nobody knows what's happening to him. The last we heard from a lawyer who's dealing with the case, he said that they have transferred him to a hospital because obviously they were torturing him like they tortured all the doctors they arrested and the heads of the hospitals. They basically want them to go public admission under torture, by torture, to say our hospitals are Hamas headquarters. So that's why it's okay for you to bomb them. This was what they are doing to the doctors. That's why they arrested over 300 key doctors and professionals in charge of hospitals.
Does anyone else have questions? And can you use the hand to put up your hand and ask your question? Rona.
Yeah, it's my last question, I promise.
No, it's fine, Rona. It's lovely to have your question.
Yeah, I just, I don't want to sort of monopolize the questions, but can Mazin please explain why he said that the Zionist project started in the 1920s? Because from my understanding, it started with the Balfour Agreement in 1948. So can you talk a bit about why it started in the 1920s?
Yeah, very simple. And before 1920, the Zionist project, before 1919, really, the Zionist project was not doing very well and not succeeding in anything because Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire. And then the British Empire won the war against the Ottoman Empire. And part of their winning the war was to also fulfill their 1917 Balfour promise to the Zionist movement for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So they made that promise in 1917. In 1919, they occupied Palestine. In 1920, they got the mandate from the what was then called the League of Nations. The British and French Empire basically twisted the arms of the few other countries that were in the League of Nations. And they got the mandate on Palestine in 1920, and they appointed the first Zionist ruler in Palestine. His name is Herbert Samuel, Zionist Jewish guy, in charge of Palestine. And he's the first guy. That's when Palestine started being transformed to a Jewish state. Palestine used to be multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual before 1920. After 1920, for example, Herbert Samuel was the first ruler of Palestine as a Jewish Zionist. who instituted apartheid laws in Palestine 1920 and 21, including segregating public schools where they put Jewish children separate from non-Jewish children, as they called them, which of course the majority were non-Jewish people here in 1920. But all the Christian, Muslim, Baha'i, Druze, everybody was in one set of public schools together. And the Jewish children were segregated by Herbert Samuels to be in Jewish schools run by the Jewish Agency, which is the Zionist movement, basically, to brainwash them so that they don't get along with the other people in Palestine. This is the first beginnings of the apartheid system, and Herbert Samuel did much other damage. Like, for example, he's the one who started giving the company Makarot, Israeli, or at the time, of course, not Israeli, Zionist company, access to the water and control of the water, because he knew as a Zionist that without control of water, you don't have control of anything. So it all started in 1920, it didn't start in 1948.
No. And I think the Balfour Declaration was 1917, so.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And Esti, I think you have a question? Esti Dinur, you have your hand up.
You can unmute.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't notice I was muted. Thank you. I wanted to hear Mazin's thoughts about the latest, or one of the latest things from Trump, who's talking now about sending the Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt. He also talks about how it's a very nice real estate, and that we heard that during the first Trump administration, when his son-in-law Jared Kushner was talking about it as a very nice beachfront area for Israeli settlers and rich Americans. What do you think about all of that, Mazin, and what are your concerns? I mean, might that happen? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this is bizarre for me. I mean, if I can be sarcastic, I would say Donald Trump and his family should leave the United States so that the indigenous people of the United States can develop it back to be multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual society. That's what I would say to Donald Trump if I was to be a bit aggressive. But look, the people of Gaza, 2.3 million people, 70% of them are already refugees from areas that are now considered the state of Israel, like what is now called Sderot. You know, that's a new name for Najd, which is Palestinian village. You know, or Ascalon, which used to be Ascalon, a Palestinian village. So if he wants to help the Palestinians of Gaza and they are too much for him, I think the most logical solution is to say, okay, since 70% of them are from what became the state of Israel, then let's move them back to where they belong, really, which is inside the state of Israel, inside that country. And then they can rebuild there instead of rebuilding refugee camps in the Gaza Strip. But these plans for ethnically cleansing the Gaza and the West Bank and parts of Jordan and parts of Lebanon existed in the Zionist mentality from a long time ago. If you look even in 1919, when the Zionist movement, led by Herbert Samuel, by the way, presented the map of what the Zionists like for a Jewish state, not a state of its people and keeping Palestinians. That map was clear. It included parts of Sinai, it included the Gaza Strip, included the West Bank, it included parts of Jordan, it included parts of Syria, which now Israel occupies, by the way, not only the Golan Heights, but southern Syria. They already spread there. and southern Lebanon, which Israel already has forces there, and they occupied it before until Hezbollah kicked them out in 2006. So these plans are always there. Now, what for us Palestinians? Well, we learned the lesson of 1948. That's why you see tens of thousands of Palestinians lining up at the Netzarim junction to go back to North Gaza, even though North Gaza is pretty much wiped off the face of the earth as buildings and stuff like that. They want to rebuild. One of them who managed to get to North Gaza sent me a picture. I can share it with you one day if you want. A picture of his demolished home with some irises that are growing in his garden, you know, that have grown out of the rubble. And he says to me, just like this plant, we will regrow here. We're not going to repeat the Nakba of 1948. They're not going to do to us what they did to us in 1948. This is the persistence and the resilience of our people. And that's why Israel is in a quandary. They don't know what to do, even if Trump helps them. We're not going anywhere. I assure you, many people are willing to die on their land than leave. It's as simple as that.
I'd love to see that picture.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Naomi has a question. Naomi.
Yes, hi, Mazin. It's fascinating to hear you talk, and the eco side, the way you describe is just horrendous. You said quite a lot about colonialism, and you talked about the way colonial powers have operated across the world to destroy the communities and the culture and the lives of many colonized people. Some people in our movement sort of get mixed up sometimes, and they think that Zionism is just a Jewish thing. I mean, I'm sure you know the history. Ilan Pape's recent book tells us a lot about the fact that Zionism was kind of promoted in the 19th century by Christian Zionists, and that many Americans, Trump-supporting Americans, have this sort of messianic view based on the Bible about that. How do you reflect on that? Because obviously you're talking to a Jewish organization this evening, and we're so delighted to have you, because we need the world to understand the true nature of Zionism and the interests it serves. It's not just serving Jews.
Yeah. You know, there's, I don't know, it was Ilan Pape or Norman Finkelstein who said we should stop calling it Zionism, we should start calling it Jewish supremacism or something like that. I mean, I don't want to enter too much into the philosophical and linguistic aspects, but what is Zionism? Zionism is a movement, the word Zionism, by the way, originated in the mid-19th century, when the European empires were collapsing, and in place of the European empires, there was creation of nation states. And nation states in Europe, by nature, discriminate against minorities, because when you are an empire, the emperor doesn't care whether you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, you know, gypsy, whatever, as long as you paid your taxes and didn't bother him or her. But anyways, when you have nation states, I want it to be quote unquote uniform. And uniformity means, well, Germany for the Germans, German-speaking, Aryan, whatever, or Hungary. So instead of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was pretty much tolerant of others, the nation states, by definition, discriminate. And so you saw discrimination increase in Europe dramatically in the 19th century. Now, you know, logically, as a scientist, I look at social phenomena like I look at nature. I study what's the variables. So logically, if you're a Jew in Europe discriminated against, what's your choices? Well, you either go to another country, and that's what happened with most places, or you resist the discrimination, or you think maybe there's another solution. So a tiny minority of European Jews, by the way, Zionists, political Zionists I'm talking about, tiny minority thought, well, you know, let's create a Jewish state and have a nation state, just like Germany for Germans, France for the French people, you know, Israel, a Jewish state for the Jewish people. A small minority thought that was a good idea. I'm sorry, but most Jews didn't think it's a good idea in the 19th century.
You're right, Mazin. Thank you.
Okay. And
It was
history proved that it's not a good idea. Let me explain why. History proves that it's not a good idea. First of all, you know, it's like assuming Judaism somehow is outside of history. No, Judaism is like any other religion. It's part of history, of humanity, of atrocities of humanities, and of atrocities. I mean, when the Europeans discriminated against minorities, they didn't just discriminate against Jews, they also discriminated against Gypsies or against Protestants in majority Catholic countries or against Catholics in majority Protestant countries and so on, until the Enlightenment and getting better at it and so forth. And now Europe, by the way, is abandoning this nation-state concept, which they invented after they exported it to us here in the Arab world, in the Middle East, as some people call it. I like to call it Western Asia. They imposed it on us by creating things called Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, whatever. They imposed it on us, and now they are leaving us holding the bag while they form a European Union. This is horrible, you know? And I think it's a bad idea, and it's a bad concept, and as you saw, led to what? You know, the ultimate genocide. Genocide. There's no other, term for it. Ethnic cleansing, all of these things.
Yep. Terry, can you unmute, Terry, and ask your question?
I can, and I have. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Terry.
And thanks, Mazin. I want to take the conversation back to the ecological crisis. Obviously, all of these things are deeply interrelated, as you've explained so clearly. But I was looking at your website, and I see that you haven't been able to produce an annual report since 2023, which isn't very surprising. I hope you're still there and can hear me. But I was interested in whether you have materials that relate to some of the stuff that you were saying earlier about the impact of the war since October 2023 and the genocide environmentally that we can use in Britain and elsewhere, particularly to engage with people who are coming to politics through environmentalism. I don't know if you're aware that in Britain we've managed to do some things to bring together pro-Palestinian activists and Palestinian activists with the environmental movement, but I think that's something that we need to develop and build on in the months ahead for all the reasons you explained.
Yeah, no, we issued our report 2023. It was out in January 2024. And now we are writing our report for 2024. And it will be published maybe a couple of weeks later because of the busyness at the end of the year, and we have transitions here we have to deal with. But we will have our 2024 report out soon to you. We've
lost your picture, Mazin. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Because I have a flu and I didn't want you to watch me clear my nose.
Oh, okay.
No. But anyways, the other thing is we had the 10-year anniversary last year, and we did a 10-year booklet, which I encourage you to look at our website. I'm going to put our website in the chat room for people to it's basically PalestineNature.org, and we'd love to hear from you, by the way, and we'd love to have you come here The impact of the war on our work at this institution, there was an impact, both positive and negative, of course. Positive, for example, is that we redirected our efforts to do research on ecocide and the war's impact on the environment, and we published a lot of material on how wars impact our environment, etc. But we also started working closer with the people of Gaza. It brought Palestinians from 1948 areas here, brought Israelis even who cared about us to work with us, and many, many others globally. My wife and I actually took trips in 2024 to 7 countries. Australia, New Zealand, I'm sorry, using the colonial names for those countries, but Aotearoa in New Zealand. But anyway, also England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and the USA. In this trip around the 7 countries or so, we spoke to at least 15,000, 20,000 people who we collected emails from, and average 3 talks a day. So I consider that a positive thing. There's a huge interest. I spoke even at campuses that had camps, you know, university campuses used to have camps. I don't know if they're still going on in places like Sydney and Melbourne. And
we had one in Cambridge here.
Yeah, so it was great. There's a lot of interest in the world. There's a lot of movements. There's a lot of pressures on the governments. We just need to do more of it.
Lucy, you have a question. Lucy.
Yeah. I wonder, Mazin, if you could tell us what you've noticed about the insect life in Palestine since the war's been going on.
About the what?
Insect life.
Insect life.
Because I suppose globally people say, well, the insects have been the most amongst nature. Insects have been more affected than mammals and invertebrates and so on.
Yes, we actually published some papers on insects, and we do have a problem globally, as you know. You know, even I remember as a child here, you know, when you drove a car or as a teenager, when people drove a car, you have a lot of insects hitting your windshield. There's lots of insects around the world. Have been decimated. There's estimates actually of the biome volume of insects declined like 90% or something.
It's like that, yes.
It's horrible. So yeah, you know, they are just as important as bigger animals.
Especially to birds.
Yes, and the pollinators especially are most problematical, you know, because when people use insecticides and kill pollinators, we can't have foods, we can't have plants that they produce. We have huge problems.
Ginny?
Thank you. Yes, so if Israel forces out UNRWA this coming week, I guess I don't need these, this week, are there plans for the schools and the health clinics in the West Bank? And
well, I'm not sure, you know, it's really tough. There are some people planning, there's the education people, the Ministry of Education, which I'm in touch with, you know, Palestinian Ministry of Education, is even trying to reclaim the teaching in Gaza, which has been dead basically for 15 months. Although some people on individual initiatives are teaching in those tents. Some teachers are just amazing, you know, they're not getting salaries or anything, but they are gathering students saying, come, let's teach something, even in the tent cities. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's really Palestinians love education. I mean, there's a guy in Gaza who did his PhD defense from his tent, you know, in Malaysia, actually, he was doing it.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And there are people who are, you know, the guy was, you know, giving people choice, 20 shekels or a book. And they say, no, a book. You know, they want to learn, they want to get educated, they consider it also as a form of resistance. So
Yes.
I put my emails in the chat, by the way. Any of you who are not on my email list, I send weekly email messages about what's going on and important things like what's happening on the ground that you don't see in mainstream media. So send me a message with your email and I'll subscribe you to our list.
Thank you, Mazin.
Thank you.
Linda.
Thank you. And actually, thank you, Mazin, for your emails, because they really, really are helpful to see really what's going on. Mine was, I'm sorry if you already answered this because I missed a section in the middle, but we're planning to come out on a solidarity visit in a week's time. And I wanted to just check whether, A, we're going to be able to get to Bethlehem and places like that. And also if it's just checking that it is useful for people and that I've heard from other people that it's positive when somebody, you know, when we come out and sort of offer to support and just be there with you. But I thought while we're on this opportunity to ask you directly if that's the case.
Yes, we welcome visitors and the people who come here. Actually, Friday I had a group of international visitors brought by Sabil group. And they all say that visiting, even in these difficult times, is actually very redeeming and very, very encouraging. Ironically, it's encouraging both ways. It's encouraging to the people here, of course, shows that people care and stuff like that. And it's encouraging to the people who come because they see the resilience and they see our, how should I say, stubbornness. That we are not going to give up despite Trump or Netanyahu and all the fascists around them. We're not, and the collusion of the European governments that are now trying to silence free speech. We're not going to be silenced. And so they get encouraged and they get, all parties get encouraged.
Oh, thank you.
We'll take a couple more questions and then I think we're going to well, I don't know whether you'll go to bed even with the flu, so I can't say we'll let you go to bed, but I hope you'll get more sleep tonight. John and then Sheila. Well, it's not Sheila, but it's Sheila's computer, I think.
Mazin, I've really enjoyed your contribution today. My question is, what do Palestinians think of the Palestinian Authority?
Well, I can't speak for all Palestinians. I'm sure there's a lot of Palestinians who support the Palestinian Authority. There's actually 150,000 of them that are employed by the Palestinian Authority. So I'm sure their salaries are dependent on them being rah for the Palestinian Authority. But the rest of the population, I'm sure you find different views. My own view is well articulated in my books and articles about the subject, where I explain that the horrific surrender document called the Oslo Accords that created this authority to protect Israel was designed already by the Israeli system from the 1920s. Even Ben-Gurion spoke about it, autonomy for some places in Palestine for the local people and an apartheid system. And that this system, they tried to implement it after 1967 with the village leagues, and then they created, you know, this idea of Palestinian Authority. Similar to what the Vichy government in France was under the Nazi occupation. but perhaps worse, because the Nazi occupation was not a colonizing occupation. In our case, it's a colonizing occupation. So it's a displacement, also displacement colonization. So Vichy government here is much worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sheila, and then Lynn, you really will be the last after Sheila. Okay. I can't hear you. You need to unmute.
We're still mute.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. It's,
We've got you
I'm
now.
not.
Okay.
Thank you. Mazin, sir, I was very honored to meet you briefly and hear you speak in Scotland. We will not forget you. We are a lot of us shouting, and we will never stop talking about Palestine, sir. I would of our many different things that we do in our small way here. Is there one thing which you would like to concentrate on? We are posting, reposting, we are marching, we are doing boycotts, we are signing petitions, we are writing to our MPs to ask that they represent in the Houses of Commons here. Is there one thing, sir, that you would like us to concentrate mostly on?
Sorry, I cannot come up with one thing, but I will put in the chat a link from my own website, qumsiyeh.org, what basically on the front page of qumsiyeh.org, I have a link called What You Can Do, which includes 76 items you can do.
Okay. So Lynn, you have the last question, and then we're going to finish.
Just a second. Yeah. I'm on my way to march with the Israeli apologists regarding the hostages, which I do every Sunday since about 8 months ago. And I march behind them, I stay clear of them, just behind them, with a Palestinian flag and a keffiyeh and my Free Palestine t-shirt. And at first they were very adversarial, but they let me go there now. But I have some friends there, and if you want to know the truth, I don't think it does much good, Mazin, to talk to the crowd. I want to be able to answer their questions. Like, he watched this thing with Palestine Museum, with what's the guy's name? Sabag, you know him? S-A-B-A-G-H.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of my friends from there said, today, misinformation, quote unquote, totally glossed over Arab violence against Jews. British, look up Great Arab Revolt of 1936, Hebron Massacre. He showed a photo of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, but failed to mention that this prime Palestinian political leader spent the World War II years as Hitler's guest in Berlin, planning to return to Palestine to build concentration camps for Jews. He doesn't ask why after 1948, when Jordan occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem and Egypt occupied Gaza, there was no effort over this 19-year period to make a Palestinian state.
So what is your question, Lynn?
His last question is,
What's your question?
Why doesn't anyone want to talk to the Israeli apologists? I don't want to keep going to these things and hearing the same thing. It's like PTSD, like Mazin talks about. Just to talk about it is nothing. Why can't you talk to your neighbors that disagree with you? Why not have an open discussion about these kind of questions? Answer them.
I am engaged in discussion with Israelis and even with Zionists. I'm on a group, for example, that includes about 7,000 Israelis, and we're in discussion all the time. And I debated all leading Zionists in the world, by the way, not you know, in the US, certainly, maybe not in the world.
I'm talking,
Let-
Mazin, I'm
let
talking
me
about
finish,
people
please.
like
Let
you and me, just, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
not like you that are
Let-
out there,
let me-
just
let me
everyday
finish.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Let me
right, then.
just explain.
Let
So
Mazin
when I debated like Morton Klein, the head of the World Zionist Organization of America, in front of about 200 Jews in Manhattan College, for example, I won that debate, and he refuses to debate me again. I spoke at synagogues, I spoke at Jewish community centers. I'm happy to talk to anybody who will want to talk and bring up facts and so-called counterfacts or alternative facts, as the neocons like to call them. So we can discuss all the issues, the questions that you raised, for example, but we really don't have to discuss them. The reality is that most Zionists, they know the facts. They know these facts. They know the stories. They know that actually, for example, that the Zionist movement actually signed the agreement with Hitler, whereas what's his name, Sharif, the person you mentioned, I forgot his name, but anyway, he never signed an agreement with Hitler. Hitler basically dismissed him took a picture with him and dismissed him, told him, go speak to the Bosnian Muslims to support me, and then maybe we can talk. Whereas the Zionists actually signed an agreement with Hitler and broke the boycott of Nazi Germany. The Zionist movement, including Ben-Gurion, by the way, were not concerned about saving Jews. They were more concerned about moving the Zionist project forward. That's why Ben-Gurion refused, for example, even though the Jewish National Fund and others had a lot of money, he refused to give money for people transporting children from Europe to England, even 2,000 euro or whatever it was, German mark at the time. He refused. Yeah. He pounded on the table and said, not one penny for such a project, because if I had the chance to save all the Jewish children of Europe by sending them to England and only half of them by sending them to Eretz Israel, I would choose the latter option.
Okay.
And on and on. So we have to address the facts, and I'm happy to address the facts, and I do it all the time with Jews, with others, and I expect everybody on this call also to get the information. Don't believe any word I say or anything I say.
But Mazin, I think the truth is that most of us engage in those conversations on the same terms as you, and we don't shrink away from those conversations, and we try and have them. I mean, I know for myself, I'm booked to have 2 conversations. I know they're difficult conversations in the next few days with people here who say they've got views diametrically opposed to mine. Yasser, are you still there? Because my Palestinian friend, I know you wanted to say something and now I can't see you.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, because you're here and I'm really glad you're here, but just say something. Yeah.
Comment about because I'm really sorry, but like the previous question came a little bit aggressive, so I just kind of like all Palestinians always try to engage with Israelis. As a matter of fact, you know yourself, Tony, because last week the group Standing Together, which is the liberal Israelis, were in Cambridge, and I went to them to discuss.
Yeah.
The points they're raising and whatever, which some of them are very good and very important. But I try to raise some questions with them, like, okay, you're raising this point and whatever. So we're always in discussion, whether we like it or not. As a matter of fact, whether we like it or not, we have to be in discussion with them all the time. So to say that a Palestinian professor is like not trying to discuss or something is slightly misleading. That's
but I know you are interested in those discussions, and you know I am too.
Of course, yeah.
Because we're together.
We're humans, and we have to. Communication is the only way we can raise ourselves up together.
Yeah. Thank you, Yasser. What I want to say, we're going to come to a close now. What I feel, Mazin, is you are a born teacher. you've been a teacher, a school teacher. You're a teacher now. I think that you gave us a wonderful insight into your thoughts and your feelings and your hopes and your fears. And I feel you've been extremely generous to us this evening after so little sleep last night, because it's so hard to sleep in this situation, and because you have, I know it's part of nature, but viruses, sometimes you feel we could do without some of this, you know. It would be nice if you didn't have the flu.
I'm grateful for people always who want to learn more, and especially I'm grateful for people who think outside the box and who evaluate and think positively about the future. There's no future in segregation or discrimination. There's no future in racism. And what happened historically, we know this, if we learn the lessons of history, if we just read history carefully and not tribally, we read it as individuals judging things for what they are, we realize that we share this planet, and if we don't get along and we don't fix this planet, and what we are doing is not going to help if we keep the idea of colonialism and settlements and expansion and racism. And for the life of me, I don't understand why people want to live just with their own kind, so to speak. I am, my family is mixed. My father is Greek Orthodox, my mother is Lutheran, my wife is Chinese. My son was born in Lubbock, Texas. He's a redneck, if you want, atheist. Is this bad to have diversity? What's wrong with diversity? I don't understand people who want uniformity. So my urging to you, to everybody, to think about us as one human family, not tribes or nations or all this nonsense. By the way, read my book, Sharing the Land of Canaan, is on my website, which is qumsiyeh.org. Read to see my vision of, this is not just my vision, it's a vision of millions of people around the world, for people to live together in dignity and equality and human rights. If you want a roadmap to peace here, implement human rights. It's as simple as that. No, not complicated. And we don't need to keep making it look complicated.
Thank you.
Finally, I say I invite you to come, and I invite you also to volunteer. We have a nice building here with, unless it gets bombed, of course, but you're welcome to come and stay here. We have good hospitality. Room and board is offered for volunteers. And those of you on the call who volunteered before can testify that was a meaningful experience.
Okay. Thank you so much.